Welcome to Entry Point Faith, where every week we discover fresh meaning in the world so you can find faith your way. And now, please welcome your host, Pastor Nancy Lafferty.
You know that saying, crowns in heaven? Well, if we are in fact given crowns in heaven for acts that we have performed on earth, then those among us who have spent a significant portion of their time on this earth in the role of caregiver will be the very first in line to receive the diamond tiaras. I have spent the last 2 months of my life pretty reliant upon the kindness and the caregiving of my wife, Marcy. Since the end of February, she has been the driver, the cook, the maid, the laundress, the dog walker, and the full-time caregiver in our house. I've watched her set her own life aside and care for my needs. I am a very lucky care receiver, and I know it. There's no way I can ever really express my gratitude for her time and compassion, but I try. Every evening, I make sure I thank her for the gift of her care. I mean, I saw the movie Misery. I don't want my legs broken. Seriously, though, my eyes have been opened in the past 2 months. You know, when you're younger and you hear people say things like, my body turned against me, or my health isn't what it used to be. Those words mean nothing to you when you are 28 years old and in the peak of health. If you are able-bodied, you can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to lose your health. But when it happens, you grow in understanding, as I recently did. Not only do I have mad respect for all individuals who are not able to function independently, I have new respect for all of the individuals who provide caregiving to those of us who need their help. When I rolled my wheelchair into the kitchen and realized that I could not only not make my own coffee, but I could not have even reached a coffee mug, I woke up. How do people do this? When I confronted my inability to drive my car by myself anywhere, I felt trapped. For the past 2 months, which I recognize is a very short time compared to the challenges of so many other people, I've been dependent on the care of someone else. So the least I can do today is to recognize the millions of people who give care, who do it with love, with this message. Right now in the United States, 43.5 million caregivers are currently helping loved ones. They are husbands, wives, parents, and dear friends who are doing double duty. Their lives are filled with compassion and stress. They do the tasks of giving care with patience and with love. They are usually alone in their duties. They are often overwhelmed. They are filled with fear, and they are tired. And sometimes they're angry. They're caring for children with special needs, for parents who were once strong and active, for spouses who are injured or terminal, for people who are physically whole, but emotionally or mentally non-functional. They're amazing. They have an understanding of service and grace and compassion that places them in a truly special category. In the Bible, there is a passage that has become known as the unto the least of these passage. It is an often cited text that speaks to why we help other people out, especially those who are suffering the most in our culture. Here is the passage. A king says to his servants, I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. The servants replied, What are you talking about? When did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? Then the king will say, Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Now it's that last line I want to focus on. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Caregivers understand this Bible passage, even if they aren't familiar with it. They are serving their loved ones. They aren't doing this for accolades or for glory. They do this because they innately believe it is the right thing to do. They must do this because it is sacred. It is holy. It is because of love and for a higher purpose. As they serve their loved ones, they are taking the high road. They are honoring God, who is the source of all love. But of course, they're not always at their best. They don't always feel great when they are moving about, giving care to another person. Speaker and caregiver educator Dr. Elaine Sanchez has written these words. There are a variety of caregiver recognition weeks and months, and sometimes there are awards given at banquets to a caregiver who has done something amazing. But when you're in the trenches and caring for someone who has a chronic condition, it can feel like the hardest, most thankless job you've ever done. Understandably, in our culture, we are always aware of the person who is suffering, the one who is ill or injured or struggling. We often ask family members about their well-being. But it is the astute, the insightful among us who asks how the caregiver is doing, who offers to give that caregiver a break, who recognizes the sacrifice of personal time, energy, and sometimes privacy that has become the everyday routine of the caregiver's life. And that, right there, asking how the caregiver is doing, is one of the most loving things that the rest of us can do. Next, we can thank them on behalf of their care receiver, who may or may not have the strength or the ability to thank the caregiver, who may be in so much pain that kind words are often difficult. Thanking the caregiver for the person receiving their care might be the exact words they need to hear. There are two other simple things that the rest of us can do to support caregivers. If you know someone who is caring for a loved one, take a moment and acknowledge the effort they are making to keep things going. Every bit of recognition and appreciation can make a huge difference to them. And finally, pray for them. Pray for their bodies to be strengthened by God, for their rest to come easily, and for their fears to be lessened. Don't pray just one time or just one day. Pray often for the caregivers that you are aware of. Rosalyn Carter, former First Lady, once wrote these words: "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver." The possibility that we will all end up needing a caregiver at some point in our lives is pretty high. The possibility that we will be a caregiver at some point in our lives is also pretty high. Let's remember the compassion and the understanding that it takes to be both the caregiver and the care receiver. A young girl tells this story. "My dad is a beekeeper, so today he showed me all the honey he had gotten from the hives. He took the lid off the 5-gallon bucket full of honey, and on top of the honey, there were these 3 little bees struggling. They were covered in sticky honey and drowning. I asked him if we could help them, and he said he was sure they wouldn't survive. I kept begging him to try to do something, and so finally he scooped the bees out of the bucket, put them in an empty yogurt container, and he put them outside on a bench, and he left them to their fate." Now, naturally, there were a lot of bees flying around out there because he had disrupted the hive with the honey collection. After a while, my dad called me out to show me what was happening. These 3 little bees were surrounded by all of their bee sisters, and they were cleaning the sticky, nearly dead bees, helping them to get all of that honey off of their bodies. We came back a short time later, and there was only 1 little bee left in the container, still being tended by the sisters. After about an hour, we checked one more time. All of the bees had been cleaned off enough to fly away, and the container was empty. Those 3 little bees lived because they were surrounded by family and friends who would not give up on them, resolved to help them until they could be set free. My friends, may we all be grateful for the caregivers who have been there to set their loved ones free. Amen.
Thanks for joining us this week on Entry Point Faith. The Entry Point Faith community meets every other Sunday at Conner Prairie in Fishers, Indiana. For more information or to join in person, visit entrypointonline.org. Entry Point Faith is a part of the Switchpoint Media Network. Find a variety of podcasts by visiting switchpoint.media.